on the subject of remote working then, so have you noticed the difference with like companies asking employees to come back 4 or 5 days a week versus like remote first?
Yeah, for sure. Like definitely seen that as a trend. So yeah, because obviously like pandemic, we were all working remotely, and then after that, it was still this kind of like remote first trend. But now, for sure, like definitely, what I'm seeing is companies are wanting people back in the office, and indeed for like sometimes even 5 days a week. Like personally, I think even if they're saying 3 days a week, for me that's a lot. A lot of companies are doing 50-50, which works really well. But then that's kind of like how it was last year. But yeah, definitely this year I'm seeing a trend for 4 or 5 days in the office for sure.
And why 5 days? That sounds so wild.
Yeah, I think so for sure. Like the reason is because that leadership in companies, they for some reason believe, despite the evidence, because if you look at articles and read articles, actually there's no evidence to suggest that people are more productive in the office, but there's a belief that people are more productive in the office. So like for me, that's a kind of like simplistic way to look at it. And a better way to look at it is to think that people collaborate more in the office, which is true. But I think it's because like after what happened with, the pandemic and working from home, and then also people working remotely, a lot of companies felt they were losing their touch with the culture. And so now the idea is, to bringing people back into the office, A, because they can be more productive, and B, because it's better for building the culture. So what I always say is like, and this isn't for me personally, but like I come to the office to collaborate, but if I actually need to work, and then I work from home. But that's a personal example. Like personally, if I need to get stuff done, I'm better just to be on my own with my headset getting stuff done. Actually, if you ask people, some people say they're more productive at the office. Some people say they're more productive at home. And I think this is the thing. I think it's a really unique to each person, which is why I think when you say, when you're pushing for 4 or 5 days a week, then that's kind of just going to cater to one type of people when actually everyone has different needs. So that's why I think it's better to be more flexible.
Yeah, and I'm totally with you. I need to have that sign on my back, like, please don't disturb me. I'm trying to work, because I get so distracted.
Yeah.
And even when I go to the office, sometimes I just find myself locked in a room doing interviews all day,
Yeah.
or struggling to find a room.
Yeah.
Because in recruitment or even in HR, like we have sensitive conversations. We're talking about salaries, and sometimes I'm doing video calls with someone. I've had it once before where they're like, oh, that's my ex-colleague. Someone literally walking past my interview, and I was like,
yeah, they can see them on the video screen, right? You're like,
okay. I was like, this needs to change. So like, I guess if companies want to adjust, they also need to adjust themselves, right? They can't just keep to like the same space in the office. They have to expand. And I'm sure that's more expensive than just being remote first, right?
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing as well, like what I always say to companies, if you want people to come to the office, then like make the office nicer. So a really good example of this is HiBob, which is a HR system. They invested in their office and they made it it's kind of like when you go there, it feels more like a co-working space, and there's loads more space for collaboration. So if you're going to say that you want people back in the office, then you should invest in it.
Yeah.
A good example is actually the company I work for, 7 people. We don't even call it the office. We call it the clubhouse. And we literally have no problem making people come to the office because there's like a place to chill, like a place to get coffee. And we try to make it, there's a roof terrace, like a terrace outside. And we try to make it more like a vibe. We have even like this alpaca. Obviously not a real one.
Oh, I was going to say, like the office alpaca.
Yeah. Alfie the alpaca. So it does help with the face-to-face collaboration, right? Because I'm sure you have this, like if you've met someone face-to-face, even when you have a video call with them, you still kind of feel the connection.
Yeah.
So there is value in having a face-to-face connection. And also if you're collaborating in person, right, then you can get on the whiteboard, you can get the sticky notes out. So it is easier for collaboration, but I don't necessarily agree that being in the office equals productivity. But and we were just talking about this before the podcast offline, right? But like I also think that typically the leadership in companies are like typically a little bit older, right? Because obviously it's taken some time to get to like C-level, and so they were obviously used to working in the office for 20, sometimes even 30 years. So they're having to adjust to this new way of working. And then people who are a little bit younger, it's sometimes all they've ever known is working remotely.
Yeah.
So. And they're feeling, oh yeah, actually we don't have the same connection with the people that we used to have. I don't know if you've noticed this, like offices are quieter now Because I remember
Yeah.
when I was a recruitment consultant in London, like
Loud.
yeah, there was like 200 consultants all on the phone at the same time. But now the concept of being on the phone with someone in the same room is like a bit weird, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, the point I wanted to make is that under pressure, people are going back to the way they used to work, right? Which is in the office. So that's why there's this pressure to get back in the office. But I think for me, that's quite a simplistic view. And actually, what we need to do is, firstly, not like I said, number one, if you want people to come to the office, make it a real nice place to be, then people will come.
Yeah.
But secondly, like making sure it's properly enabled for hybrid working, right? So making sure we have all the meeting rooms with all like the new equipment, cameras, everything. And also changing the cultural way around the way of working. One real big trend at the minute is asynchronous work. So obviously opposite of synchronous. So we're all working at different times. Rather than just saying everyone come back to the office, let's try a different way of working and actually educate people on that way of working. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, I've not heard of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like different, do you mean like different times and time
Yeah, I mean,
zones?
so asynchronous work is when people are in different time zones, right? So
Okay.
if like you have people in like the US, Europe, and Asia, obviously they're in different time zones. But if you work asynchronously, that means it's way more. The concept behind asynchronous work is that you should be able to work without being disturbed, but access the information you need. So there's a lot more documentation.
Yeah.
There's a good masterclass actually on online by EO, do you know what an EOR is? Employee of record, the like third party companies. Yeah. So there's remote.com. They have a good masterclass online about asynchronous work.
Yeah. And I think it's also quite cool because then if you're a business that's kind of operating 24 hours, etc., then having access to even HR or recruitment all the time could be quite interesting. Like you said, I think the choice should be ours, right? Like with remote work or come into the office, because some people do actually prefer seeing people and they get energy from other people. Otherwise, some people, for example, like my sister, fully remote, different country completely, like South Korea, and her office is in London. So she thrives being as far away from civilization.
Yeah, and like it's what I've seen, a trend you've seen a lot is, I've worked for the different SaaS companies, and the sales and marketing team, way more extroverted and like you say, get energy from people. It's really easy to get them to the office. They love it. They love coming to the office, right? Whereas the software engineers, software developers are a bit like, not wishing to generalize, but typically, some of them are a little bit more introverted. They might not get so much energy out of interacting with people. And they're like, so why do I have to come to the office just because the sales team do? So, and I think with that, like different people have different needs. So like, for example, personal example for me, like I had a burnout like, I think 3 years ago. And so that means now I'm really sensitive to like bright lights and like a lot of sound.
We should have recorded this in the dark.
No. But like if I'm like, so 5 days in the office, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so like overstimulated from that. Yeah. And this is the thing as well, like a lot of offices, the acoustics are not very good. So, this is why you see in the more attractive offices, let's say, they have like a lot of plants, a lot of paintings, maybe a carpet, and that absorbs the sound. So there's these small things that make a difference because, like I said, different people have different needs, which is why it's really important to be flexible, right? So, maybe someone has some kind of like autoimmune disease, or another good one is people with like really high anxiety. Then it's quite a lot to come to the office. Not everyone is a social, right? And some people find they might have social anxiety, right? So it's hard to be in big groups all the time. So this is why I think flexibility is the key word. So then we can tailor the solutions to fit people's needs. Because everyone has different needs, right? So rather than just like, because a lot of companies don't want to have policies, and I don't really believe in policies anymore because it's like the police, right? And one thing we always say at Seven People is, if you want people to act like adults, you need to treat them like adults. So it's really good to have what we say is like define the parameters of the playground, but then you can go play in the playground, right? So like what I mean is having guidelines rather than policies. So these like one size fit all policies don't really work. So it's good to have flexibility in that. So maybe you might say, well, actually the sales team, we need them to be in the office more because they need to like collaborate more, whereas the engineering team can be less. So you can have different guidelines for different teams. There's no need to say the whole company is 4 days a week in your office. Maybe like this department is 1 day, this department is 2 days.
Yeah. And what you've touched on about social anxiety or your preference, essentially, you don't really want to communicate that. Like, you just want to have the freedom
Yeah,
to manage your own
yeah,
schedule and just maybe go directly to your line manager and be like, hey, Loki, like, I don't really like going all the time. Can I
yeah,
just, or I live really far away, for example, like, and just arranging that with them.
yeah.
So how has it been for you to like kind of speak about the topic and negotiate like with senior people, like trying to persuade them to be more flexible?
Yeah. So I think the thing is when you're working with senior leaders is like it's always really important to be data driven, right? Because um like if I'm like, yeah, I don't think people should come to the office, they're like, well, that's your opinion, right? So what I actually said this in my own podcast. I gave this example when I used to work for a company called Gympass, they're now called WellHub. My manager, he said to me, are you God? If not, please bring me data, right? So what he meant was like your personal opinion is not really relevant. Of course, your expertise is relevant, right?
Mm.
So if you can say, you know, I've worked at all these companies and then these different companies did this and this worked, that's different. But like, you know, for example, with the working from home topic, I can quite easily just make a survey and show you that like 80% of the employees
Yeah.
want flexibility. So then like what is their case? And you, so yeah, so what I make sure is in the employee engagement surveys, making sure you're asking questions about this topic, and then you can just show the data to the leadership. Also, as well, doing exit interviews.
Mm.
When you ask people, a lot of people will say, "Yeah, actually, I felt that I preferred to go for work for a remote company because they had flexibility."
Mm.
One other example on this topic is that because you know I work at a consultancy and then we work with a lot of scale ups. So my colleagues are working at different companies. So the ones that are remote first, what we're noticing, or even fully remote, what we're noticing is that they're finding it really easier to hire people.
Okay. Interesting.
So it's like that's a really huge talent pool that you can tap into because people are really looking for flexible working right now. So the more flexible you are, like the easier it is to fill your vacancies.
Yeah. You've really noticed that with
Yeah, for
like,
sure. Definitely. Like if there's literally people lining up to work in more remote companies.
something I was asked before as a HR manager and recruiter when I was heading up HR at a company was, how do we know people are working really remotely, like without, of course, spying on them or
Yeah.
installing something on their
Yeah.
laptops, right? Because that's also something going around that like
Yeah.
apparently companies are doing this and they're installing
But like for me, that's
things.
wild. Like that's wild that you would like hire recruit. So you go to market, you spend, you know how what you're a recruiter, right? You know how hard it
Yeah.
is to find people, right? And then
Mm.
like you got to source them. You have these like really long interview processes. You give them an assignment, blah blah blah. It takes a long time to hire people. Then you hire them, and they've with all this experience from these companies, and then you're like, I'm not sure if they're really working at home. It's like for me, that's so like I don't understand. That full process is crazy to me.
Yeah. It's
So
like
like
a,
not trust people is so weird to me.
yeah, it's like a them problem,
Yeah,
isn't it? It's not
yeah,
like actually the new person because you don't even know
yeah,
them really.
yeah,
And like you said, you're trusting them based off of their experience, even references
yeah,
sometimes. And sometimes
yeah,
that's not good
yeah,
enough. It's really wild.
yeah. So it's like you've done all this stuff and then gone through this whole process to hire someone, and then you're like, yeah, I'm not really sure if they're working, and it's like, but you just did this really in detail hiring process.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing is with that as well, and what is good is most companies are outcome driven, right?
Mm.
Like we have metrics. I mean, a lot of people are working with OKRs, so you can see if people are not delivering results.
Yeah.
That being said, there is a trend. I forget what the name is. It's some bias, and I've noticed this when I've worked in companies with regional offices. The people in the headquarters are getting promoted faster than people in regional offices because
I've heard
like the
about
managers are actually
this.
seeing them do the work, right?
Oh, that's wild.
What's the name? There's a name, something bias, proximity bias,
Proximity bias.
proximity
Oh,
bias. Yeah,
right.
proximity bias. So, yeah, because it's like, okay, yeah, I see Daisy 3-4 times a week. Yeah, I can see that she's working. Yeah, I hear her call. She's so good on the phone. And so these people get promoted faster because they're closer to the decision-making power.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, that's the trend I've
That's
seen.
wild.
Yeah, yeah. But this is why, like, you really want to be data-driven and outcome-driven, right? Which is why it's like, okay, like this is your level. These are what we expect of that level. Um, and then, yeah, attach a number to that if you can. I'm sure we've
Mm.
used like number of hires or time to hire, blah, blah, blah. So
Yeah.
actually look at the data and what is the data telling me rather than my own biases.
Yeah, I spoke about this in a previous podcast before because there's that trending like a TikTok video about oh, I got advice from a Nike director, like, and this is how you get promoted, and like you said, be invisible in the office. But I don't know, when I've seen it, like, yeah, I mean, I'm not really like an avid office
Yeah,
attender,
yeah.
and I was nearly promoted because I rejected the director level offer. That's a different discussion for another day. Within the year,
She's like, I got a director level offer, just FYI.
yeah, and then I rejected
I
it.
rejected it though.
Yeah, some people might think that's insane, but it was for good reason because I left
Mhm,
the company
mhm,
3 months
mhm.
later. Yeah, even I didn't really go often and I was traveling all the time and stuff. I wasn't really like working loudly in the office, but I
Yeah,
work loudly on Teams, on
yeah,
Slack, on LinkedIn.
yeah.
Like I just always like document and show
Document.
my
Yeah,
work.
exactly.
So I think that's also really important maybe for people who are not maybe who their offices are not local and they can't physically go. They're like, I think you could still get promoted if you're
Yeah,
just a virtual worker, as long as you're working loudly,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah. And this is in the in the masterclass which I mentioned about asynchronous work. They encourage that share things in public channels as much as possible. And so I do that with for example, one of my clients, I'm managing the people team there. And so yeah, even if I don't think it's relevant to the whole team, it's just relevant if I just need to message one person, unless it's sensitive or private, of
I
course,
was
which
gonna
is different.
say,
Yeah.
yeah,
But if
yeah,
it's like, okay, then I just share is in the team chat as much as possible.
yeah,
Um yeah. And then and also I make sure that uh I'm showcasing my work. And this is a personal thing, but like I've always, because when my career has mostly been as a HR business partner and then more
mm,
recently in head of people roles. But like when you're a business partner, you can just get to the end of the year and be like, what did I actually do? Because you're kind
mm,
of just between the business and the people team. So this is just for me personally, but I always made sure there was a project I can put my name on, right? Whether it's like a HR system implementation or I designed a performance review cycle or I changed the engagement survey, blah blah blah.
yeah,
Making sure you can say you like making sure you own the work and it's your work.
yeah. I agree. And I don't know if you do this, but I was always I've always done this in different companies as well. I have an Excel sheet and I always document every role I filled, who I filled it with, like just for my own personal use, just to kind of, again, at the end of the year, really align myself with my achievements. Cause I don't know if you do this as well, but I really attach myself to my projects
Yeah,
and my work and my achievements as well. So it's just like a reminder, but also if I'm, due to be performance reviewed, for example, I've got like a whole document of like what I've done. Cause sometimes I get a mind blank.
yeah.
If like someone says like, what did you do
You're
this
like,
year?
huh?
I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't know.
I'm the
Did I do
same.
anything?
Yeah, well, I'm like, what did I do
Like,
yesterday? Right,
yeah.
like this. No, but like actually, this isn't so. You just made me think of a statistic I read that newly promoted managers have 30% more meetings than more experienced managers, and the reason for that is because they're not feeling as safe and secure. Because when you're a more experienced manager, um, you trust people more, give people more autonomy, and then more freedom to work. Whereas typically, someone who's just been promoted is a more like micromanager, right?
Mm,
And the way to deal with that is as a individual contributor or employee is to like manage your manager and like you making sure you're reporting to them. So on Friday, you send them an email saying, okay, cool, this is what I did this week. This is where I struggled. This is where I need your help. This is my priority for next week. So you're making sure to over communicate in that sense.
And some people might think like, I don't want to piss off my manager
Yeah.
or annoy them or anything, but I think it's essential
Yeah.
to show them that you're actually
Yeah. And vice
doing
versa. Like
work.
I, with my team, so yeah, I'm a consultant, so I work with multiple clients. But yeah, sometimes at a client, I'll be managing a team, and then I'm making sure I'm sharing with them what I'm doing. Right? I'm like, okay, cool. Like, this is the pitch deck I made for I don't know, the new end of year review cycle, and share it with them. Or I created this workshop about company values, or this feedback workshop, and I'm like, this is what I did, and this is the process I went through to do it. So so I think I agree. Like, just showcase yourself.
Mm,
Is it,
particularly if you're remote working.
yeah, and I think
Yeah.
it kind of links through to personal brand, right? It's about building your personal
Yeah.
brand,
Yeah. Absolutely.
and your like internal personal brand. And I even say that to my team, like, what is our team's brand? You know?
Mm.
So
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
oh,
yeah,
I like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah. Just to make them aware of it, understand like the kind of story, and
yeah,
also they're more likely to be brand ambassadors as well, low
exactly.
key, because they're kind of like, we're working towards something. I understand our vision.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
that's really cool.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of work you can do with that, because quite a lot of the time in the workplace we end up like talking about what we're doing, right? Like I did this week, I'm going to do this next week, but then not necessarily how we're doing it. So yeah, you can have like sessions with your team. Okay, what are our team values? What is our mission? There's some tools online like Team Canvas. Have you
Oh,
ever
I've
heard
not
of
heard
that?
of this.
Yeah, Team Canvas. It's an exercise you can do. Yeah, so like, what is the mission of our team? Why do we exist? What are our values? Like, what are our team norms? How do we communicate with the business? Uh, like, for example, in my team, like typically in people and culture teams,
Yeah.
you'll notice people are complaining about the managers. And I'm like, yeah, but the managers are worrying about hitting the business objectives, right? They're not worrying about what we're doing. So it's just like, you need to chase them. And like, oh, so annoying, they're not responding. I'm like, yeah, we'll keep chasing them. You know?
Oh, happens in recruitment as well. Don't worry about it.
But then like, but
Yeah.
also as well, like I also say, remember, we're here to support them,
Yeah.
right? So like, we're a service provider. So it's about having that mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of thinking like, oh, fuck's sake, I've got to ask them again.
Yeah.
They're worried about 200 different things, like you
Exactly.
said, like keeping the business afloat, like hiring for the team, or like policies and stuff like that, or contracts and stuff like that is like the least of their worries. And it's almost like, oh, HR's taking care of it. That's what I always hear. Like, they're doing it. It's fine. Like, I don't have to like tap into my network and refer someone for a job, for example. Like, recruitment team's got it. Yeah. So this is the summary. Nope. I'm gonna reword that. I need a coffee. I need to.
This coffee's good, by the way. This coffee is good.
Is it bio?
It's fair trade one.
Oh, fair trade.
I'm a coffee snob, but also there's I don't know if you've ever heard of the PX Espresso Hour. It's a podcast. There's a guy called Luke O'Mahony, right? But it's a PX stands for people experience.
Okay.
So one thing, like what we're trying to do with, because it used to be HR teams and now it's people and culture teams. Now we're trying to make it people experience teams.
Yes.
One thing I always say, we're kind of going off on a complete tangent here, but one thing I always say is with people enablers anyway, this guy Luke, he is I guess the advocate, one of the leading voices in applying product principles to people and culture teams.
Okay.
So for example, one thing I always say to my team is, if like what we're working on has to be solving a problem. If it's not solving a problem, don't work on it. Also, if the leadership are not aligned, don't work on it. So we're only
but that's tough though.
Yeah, it is.
If they're not
But that's the leaders, that's the people leaders' job to convince the leadership, right? But anyway, yeah, PX Espresso Hour. And he always starts by having a coffee and telling you about the beans and where they're from. So it's kind of like coffee meets HR. Yeah.
It's needed because we love coffee.
I'm completely promoting this other guy's podcast here. I also have my own podcast. Listen to my podcast.
Talking about your podcast, and you've mentioned 7 people a couple of times, name dropped them. Can you tell us a bit more about the business concept, what you do exactly?
Yeah, so 7 people. So like our mission is to create irresistible organizations. And one thing we believe is that kindness is magic. But to put it simply, we're a people and culture consultancy. So everyone working in the business is either a people specialist, people business partner, or head of people, or even higher. We have people more senior than that. And yeah, we pretty much work with a lot of startups and scale ups in the Netherlands, starting to work with outside of that as well in like UK.
Really?
Yeah, as well. Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, so typically we either work on assignments. So for example, right now I'm like the head of people at a company because the head of people is on maternity leave, or it could be specific projects. So yeah, I worked on assignments last year, maybe as implementing HR systems, or could be like changing a lot of what's been happening at the minute is what we call growth frameworks. So that's like the levels in the teams, having different tracks, like individual contributor track, manager track. So yeah, we work on like assignments and projects in like the people and culture domain. But what we're really trying to do is making sure that it's very much like modern and reflecting the current workforce and work trends. But then also what we try to do is like sprinkle some magic in our clients. Always, like I said, always leading with kindness.
Yeah. Has it been difficult to like tell that story? Because I think being HR and being external can be a bit wild, right? To like enter a company and like, for example, you're doing a maternity leave, filling big shoes and just owning everything and implementing new things.
So I really like it. Like for me, I find it really exciting. I'm one of the people that gets bored quite easily, right? So it's good for me to work at a company for a few months and then change. Sometimes working on like 2 or 3 companies at once. I mean, you do. So for example, last year I worked on 6 different companies.
6.
Yeah, 6. Yeah.
How do you fit that in?
Yeah. So because it'd be like dividing my time, maybe 24 hours at one company,
Ah,
8 to 10 at another. Have some hours for internal stuff as well. Um, uh, to be honest, it also gets to the stage where like it's very similar. You start to notice like a lot of the similar things in different companies. All companies have challenges, right? There's none which are amazing, but then there's typically like similar things coming up. For example, we talked about the remote work discussion. How do we drive productivity? How do we create an inclusive environment? What like I've noticed is, from working at so many companies, then it's good to just have a lot of examples now I can give you. But one thing I really believe is it's not like I mentioned it earlier. It's not like one size fits all, right? It's like really understanding, okay, what is the actual problem I'm trying to solve, right? So, for example, diversity and inclusion, huge trend, and then you go to a company like, oh, yeah, so we need to celebrate Pride, right? So then we put the rainbow flag everywhere. I mean, great for 100% do that, but are you actually working on creating a more diverse workforce? Are you actually working on how do we make it more inclusive, right? Rather than just rainbow washing, right? Which is putting the rainbow flag.
Yeah.
So being like, okay, what is the actual problem, and then trying to solve that. And then like usually because I've worked at the different companies, and you can have different models, right? So how you create your organization, and some companies just like doing it the traditional way. Some companies are like, we don't know how to do it, we just copy and paste other companies, and they're fine with that. And so sometimes you don't have to come up with a really super creative solution. Other companies, and one company I'm working with right now, they said they want to be I think I can say it's DNA.Inc. So they create streaming services. So they said we want this to be the forever place to work, and they want to have 100% retention, right? Yeah, 100% retention, because they don't want people to have big dreams,
Damn.
big dreams. But what the brief I got was they said we want to have a 3-star Michelin people experience. So
Nice.
right, and so sometimes you get these, and so for that, what that means is they want everything to be like super modern, super state of the art. So, which is a good challenge for me, because then I have to think outside the box on how we can do things.
Yeah, that's amazing what you guys are doing.
Yeah,
but you're also doing some of the tougher topics as well, right?
Yeah, so I worked on I think 3 restructures last year, and then also as well with the restructure topic, like me personally, I've been laid off twice myself.
Same.
So actually that really helped me with this topic, because then I've been on the receiving end, right? I've been on one side of the table, and I knew how it felt. So then when I was on the other side of the table, the person bringing the news, then I could also think, well, I've been on their side, so I can think about it. But yeah, we were talking before, and I think, I mean, do you know anyone who hasn't been laid off?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Oh, you haven't. Yeah, he hasn't.
Yeah, lucky guy.
Lucky bastard.
No, but I think with this, like, it's very, I would say, because do you remember it used to be like, if you got laid off, you're like, how am I gonna, when I go for my interview, how am I gonna explain it? Da, 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 da. Now I'm just like, I got laid off. And they're like, no way, what happened? And then you're like, I don't know, the company lost funding, or they overhired, or there's a lot of the time it's not your fault. Most of the time, actually, because I think it's more to do with the nature of the market and how the market works, right? Because we all say, I don't want to work for a huge corporate company. I want to go work for a scale-up company. And that means, if you work for a scale-up company, a lot of them are not even making any money yet, right? They're still at the investment stage. They're not making any profit. So that means, and sometimes as well, like external market forces can influence. Pandemic is a great example. Can influence the company, because companies have what we call like runway. So they have like X amount of months or years that they have money, because usually they're going through what is called a cash burn. So we're like investing at the minute. We're trying to scale our products. So what that means is sometimes, unfortunately, difficult decisions need to be made. But if you think about it, it's just how the market works, because there's all these like venture capital companies that wanting to invest, and then they invest, and then sometimes these investments don't work out. And unfortunately, like I said, difficult decisions need to be made.
I can imagine. And I think from an employee side, like you've experienced 2 layoffs as well, when you're not aware of like how the funding works and like the situation is with scale ups, it just sounds really attractive. It's like, I can make loads of impact. They're skyrocketing. Always the rocket emojis, isn't it? We're hyper growing. We've got X amount of investments. You think it's really profitable.
Yeah.
So if you don't really understand the business side, you really think, oh, I'm going to like grow and stay.
Like, has like Uber even made any money? I don't know. I need to check that one.
Even Spotify, like they had to lay off people to make money.
Yeah.
That sounds wild. Lay off your workforce. And now they're struggling with like certain parts of their product development and stuff. And I'm like, well, duh, because you've let them go.
Yeah. But sorry, I interrupted you. I think you were going somewhere with what you were saying before, or not. I don't know.
I don't even remember. ADD. Blame it on the ADD, baby. I was, basically saying...
so you're saying like it's attractive to work for a company and you think, like I'm going to work for this hyper growth scale up.
Exactly, it's going to scale up. I'm going to grow with it. I'm going to stay there. It's, you make loads of impact. And I think that's the attractive side.
Yeah, and I think, because one thing as well is if you look at it from the investor's perspective, they don't expect all their investments to work out, right? They're going to invest like in 10 different companies. Some of them are not going to make it. A third of them might break even. Some of them will make profit. And then one of them will do like 10x, 20x on the investment,
right?
Which pays for the rest of the other ones, right? So, you hear these big stories. Was it Alibaba or something like that? People invested in that. There's the companies that invest in that, they made X millions or billions. But there was so many investments that didn't work out, right? We hear all these stories of like, like if you invested in this company, you're going to make so much millions. And companies do make millions, but then there's a lot of investments that don't work out. So because, there's all these really creative founders out there now, which are great. Like there's so many people starting up startups and scale-ups, but they're not all going to make it. Which means that layoffs are going to happen. So for me, I think it's very much just part of how the market works these days.
Yeah.
And I'm terrible at saving money, by the way, but my budget coach is like, you should have in your bank account like 6 months worth of salary to live, right? Like, I don't know how I'm going to save that much money.
At least you've got a budget coach. At least you can afford one.
It's one of my friend's boyfriends, so I don't pay him.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so I think it's not like you should expect to get laid off in your life, but like it's possible it might happen,
Should we always have like a plan? Should we always kind of prepare for it?
I think that would be sensible, right? I guess like in the Netherlands, we're very lucky because we're very protected by laws. Like, for example, when it's decided that the company is going to go through a restructure, there's something called the Afspiegelregeling, which is my Dutch isn't that good, so not sure if I pronounced it very well, but that's called the reflection. And you have to look, okay, first of all, we're going to get rid of the contractors, then we get rid of the people on fixed term contracts. Then when we look at the permanent employees, then we have to base it on different age groups because we don't want to have age discrimination. So there is a whole process, and we're sort of quite protected, and it's very hard. You can't terminate someone's contract in the Netherlands without the permission of the, I forget the name of it, but like the law court, without the UWV's permission.
UWV, yeah.
So, we're luckily here, you end up signing a mutual agreement, which usually has like some kind of settlement involved. So luckily in this country, we're quite well protected. So when you do get laid off, you have usually a little bit of time, you have some money. There's also the transition fee, which is the minimum they have to pay you anyway. So like you usually have a little bit of money. I mean, I think I'm quite privileged. So when I got laid off, actually it worked out well for me both times. Ended up in a better job because I think it can help you have the time to reflect on what you actually want, and then look at other opportunities that maybe you didn't consider. But we can get to that. I guess you wanted to talk a little bit about like
the process.
The process, yeah.
Yeah, because I've been laid off too, so I've been on the other side. But I've also had to have been, I can't speak English today, the HR manager to do it. And I had to lay my direct team off. And No one prepares you. Well, in my experience,
Yeah,
no one prepared me for that.
yeah,
And we cried and we
yeah.
laughed and we took a 2-hour lunch because we didn't know
That's
what to do
great.
with
I mean,
ourselves.
it's not great it happened, but I think
Yeah.
it's great that there was emotions involved and there was the space to cry. And then it
Yeah.
sounds like you did it in the very human way. We went out for lunch. Like,
Yeah.
that's really important.
I don't think you can do that as an external
Yeah.
consultant. You can't just cry and go for lunch.
So for, in my example, it's happened a few times when I've been working on assignments in companies, and then it's got to the stage where the leadership are like, yeah, actually, typically what happens is the company makes projections, right, on their revenue, and then from that you can figure out, okay, how much budget, like what people do I need to get to that revenue, right, and do we have the funds? Surprise, surprise, people are optimistic, and then a lot of the time we don't hit these targets, which means that what I see a lot is companies have overhired,
Mm.
and therefore we need to lose some of the workforce. But I think there's a couple of elements to it. So first of all, it shouldn't be a surprise. So I always find it. I don't know whether you ever have this, like the financials of the company are a bit of a black box, right? In terms of like, yeah,
Sometimes.
some companies are really good at it.
Yeah.
And this is the thing I think is really important to make sure that everyone in the company has an awareness of, okay, cool, we're making this much revenue, we're making this much profit, we have this much runway. Because then if things are not going well, they start to think, okay, like,
My previous company tried to really hide it, but it was just,
yeah,
you have Google. We could
yeah,
search our company and
yeah.
the stock
Okay, it
market
was
and
a
everything.
public listed company.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so we could just see
yeah,
it. Yeah, it was documented and we were like, oh, that's how I kind of predicted.
yeah.
Yeah, it was going to happen.
Yeah, and I
So,
think as well, like, I mean, obviously, when both times I got laid off, I saw it coming, but that's because I'm in the people team, so I
mm,
can see the indicators. But the small
yeah.
indicators, like, okay, yeah, all of a sudden there's a hiring freeze, and then there's no more business travel, and then you're like, for me, that's like, okay, that's a warning sign.
Cost reduction
Yeah, oh, we need to
programs.
start. Yeah, yeah. So they're the kind of warning signs. But I will say that in most leadership in company, they try to avoid it. It's the last resort, having to let people go. And I've never had a leader of a company be like happy about it. Right? They're always devastated.
Of course,
Um,
yeah.
so that's one thing. But yeah, I think also if you have a culture of transparency in your company, then already it's not a surprise, right? And you even start to see people say, well, actually, I'm not too happy around here. Can I get a settlement, right? Like
Yeah.
some people even volunteer. So that's one thing. So yeah, making sure that everyone in the company has an understanding of the financial position of the company. But then yeah, I've seen it done really well. And if you really approach it with empathy and making sure everyone in the company understands the reason why we're doing this is for the long-term health of the company, because we could just keep you all and then in a year the company doesn't exist. So it's like there's a reason why you're doing it. So I think it's really important to explain the reasons, but then also as well, yeah, making sure you're leading with kindness, right? There's also a lot of things you can do to support people through the transition. So when I've worked at companies and we've had to do restructures, making sure that the recruitment team are briefed, and so then they can do like a CV workshop with people, they can do interview training with people, making sure the leadership are like opening up their network and saying, hey, like literally saying, if you're the I don't know, the head of a department in the company, you reach out to people in your network and say, hey, we unfortunately had to let people go in my team, but they're amazing. Like, I really recommend this person. Do you have any positions in your company?
Mm.
So, rather than just being like, yeah, unfortunately, you're getting laid off today. Please sign this document. We're going to give you some money. See you later. Actually doing it in a more human way, right? You can even making sure you have a goodbye party for everyone. Not everyone wants to come to the goodbye, right?
Yeah.
As you can imagine.
Yeah.
But yeah, making sure you're like approaching it in the human way and as well. I think it's really important that it's not a surprise, because I have been, sometimes it's a surprise, it's a specific person, but I have been involved. Actually happened to me when there was no warning signs, and then one day the CEO was like, "Yeah, unfortunately, we haven't hit the numbers, so we need to let people go." And you're like, "Whoa!" And it's like a
Yeah.
big surprise. So it
Yeah.
shouldn't really come as a surprise. So yes, I think it's really important for like the leadership of the company to take people on that journey, being like, you know what, things are not going that great here. We're going to try and avoid doing layoffs at all costs, but it might be a situation where we have to do it. And then when you are having to do it, making sure that it's done in a human way. I think you gave a good example. And then when I've had to, I've had to be on the person at the table giving the news, but making sure that you're preparing the manager to have that conversation, right? And preparing like there are going to be emotions here, and how do we deal with the emotions? So having those sessions with the managers who are going to bring the news, explain to them what to expect. For example, I will be like, usually you get 3 different reactions. Some people are just like, yeah, okay, thanks, bye. And they want to just get out as soon as possible. Some people are like just super chill about it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, some people are happy about it. Really?
Thank God.
Yeah,
I'm getting a
like,
payout.
they're like, I didn't really like it here anyway. Great. Like, really? But then the other scenario is people get very, emotional, which is completely fine.
Yeah.
And it's about having space for those emotions. I'm sure you've seen the trend in the US of people recording.
I was going to ask you, what do you think about that as a HR person?
What I've noticed is when you see those videos, it seems like a very unemotional conversation, right? Like it's different in the US. As it happens, my girlfriend is American. She lives in the US.
Right.
But it's very easy to let people go in the US. You can just
Do
decide.
they get severance?
Sometimes, yeah, it depends on the company. But you can just decide like, okay, you're fired. Also in the UK, it's quite easy to let people go within the first 2 years. Anyway, after 2 years, it's a bit more difficult. But yeah, what I noticed in those videos that go viral, the person's just like, yeah.
And they don't even know them most of the time.
Yeah.
Like, who are you?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm HR. Oh, I've never seen you before.
Yeah, and I think that's really, and that has happened to me when they've not met me before. But then you always make sure there's someone in the room that they've met. And usually like, you're sat with the manager. So the manager delivers the message. And then they're like, okay, cool. The people team are here to run through what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I have seen restructures go really, really well, and people would just like, yeah, totally understand. And if you do it properly, right, and if people also are buying into I was going to say story, but it's not a story; it's true, right?
Yeah.
Like if they believe in the CEO, then yeah, I've seen it happen when it's not been like too distressing for people, and actually people really understand. So there is a way to do it right.
Yeah.
And it's about being like leading with empathy and kindness. A good example is like, let's say people are getting like X amount of months of severance, right? Some people are on a visa, right?
Fuck, I forgot about that.
And then so if you're on a obviously in the Netherlands we have temporary contracts a lot, right? And sometimes if you don't have a permanent contract, then your visa ends when your contract ends, right? So that means you have to leave the country if you get laid off, right? So
that is heartbreaking.
So what you might do in that situation is rather than having like X amount of severance, you say, well, we'll keep you on payroll for those months, so then you can have longer to find a new role. You see what I mean?
Oh, that's
so you
nice.
just change the constructions, is having these more, again, not having one size fits all, like being a bit more creative in how we can help people. But I guess the main thing is to ease the transition. Again, as I mentioned, with like CV clinics, interview training, opening up your network.
The proper way.
Yeah, and also like don't try and hide it, right? Some companies, not any I've worked with, but some companies try and hide it, right?
They try and hide it so hard. Yeah.
But there's way more powerful if the CEO comes, does a LinkedIn post, does a press release.
With tears. Have you seen that one? The crying CEO.
But like if you're public about like, look, like unfortunately we've had to make the difficult decisions to let people go. Like it's not the fault of the people involved. And then if they're public about it, that gives the person the ability to be, then unfortunately I'm someone that's affected, and they can reach out to the network.
Yeah, I think it used to be tied to performance layoffs, but now there's like 5 or 6 different reasons, like the company performance and stuff like that. Yeah. I'm just reliving all of my layoff emotions and scenarios, because I went through 2 as well. And I really grieved, man. I really enjoyed the jobs both times, and my team and everything, and I really saw myself long term. And of course you can forecast it, but you're really like optimistic. You're like, oh, it's not gonna happen. We'll get through this rough patch, but even though the numbers don't say that.
I think as well, like for me, the first time I got laid off, I was more upset about the people,
Yeah.
It was like, okay, there's a bunch of people I've been working with for, I think at that time, 5 years or 4 years. And then, yeah, I'm not going to see them again. I was more upset about
Was it
that.
instant? Was it like,
That one, the first time was during COVID. So
Mm.
yeah. One thing, this is a personal thing, but like I say is that companies don't actually exist. They only exist. I can't like give you a company, right? I can't go like, here's a company, right? It only
Yeah.
exists in our minds. Because you
Yeah.
could, like, if you look at a company, you can change the name of the company, you can change the office, you can change all of the people, you can pivot. So like, what actually is a company, right? It's funny that companies have bank accounts, right?
Mm.
So I personally don't get too emotionally involved in the companies I work with.
Right.
But some people do, right? Some people are like, yeah, I bleed. I don't know if the brand color is blue, they're like, I bleed blue blood, right? These
Mm.
kind of things. So yeah, but personally, I try not to get too emotionally attached.
Yeah. Yeah. It is the people that
Yeah,
makes, and
exactly.
the mission that
Yeah.
makes it the company
Yeah.
that you get like really emotionally attached to. I've tried to be detached. I've been a freelancer as well. And yeah, personally, I just found it tough to like detach from the situations and stuff and the politics. And because you're there like 8 hours a day
Yeah.
sometimes. So it's, yeah, I find it really hard to like, I'm such a people person
Yeah.
and I love to like spend time with people, and
Yeah.
it's recruitment, right? I get
Yeah.
attached to my bloody candidates. I
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, oh, I love so and so. Like, we should hire so and so because I love them so much. And my manager's like, you love everyone.
Yeah.
That's the feedback I got like the
Yeah.
other day. So that's funny. But yeah, I think you've also mentioned to me about your layoffs and
Mhm.
how it maybe has a silver lining,
Mm.
like you said, that it's good to look at it from a different perspective. So I'm just curious, like, because of course the severance is
Yeah.
amazing. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's a godsend.
Yeah.
But what else can we look forward to in a layoff?
So, so yeah, firstly, as I mentioned, it gives you the opportunity to really think about what do I actually want to do. So that's why, I personally see it as a silver lining. What else? I mean, I think as well, yeah, I mean, I guess I was lucky in my examples because I've ended up with better jobs and like better coworkers. But yeah, for me, I guess that's the main thing. It actually gives you the space to go, yeah, do I actually want to do this? And then you see a lot of times people, when they get laid off, they might even go freelance or they do something completely different. It's like one of my friends, she became a trainer and now she has her own like personal training business and she's way more
Ooh.
happier.
What was she doing before?
Working in engagement teams within like
Something different.
yeah, completely different.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think it gives you the opportunity to reflect on what you actually want. Also find better jobs, and also think it gives you the time to think, actually, what do I want from a company and what do I want from my manager? Because particularly, typically more at the entry parts of the market, people are finishing university and then they're going to work for consultancies, investment banking, FMCG companies. And then, they do that for 5 years and they're like, yeah, I don't really enjoy it that much. Right. So yeah, I think it gives you the opportunity to find something more suited to you, that better fits your values and what you're looking for. For me, it's really important that like, I really like my manager.
Me too.
And because
Yeah.
it makes, for me, like, that's way more important is the culture side of the company and do I like my manager, right? So I always say to people, like, if you like your manager, then you're probably living a great life.
Yeah.
So you should stick around for a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about, because I always see the horror LinkedIn posts, like, I've been searching for 9 months after being laid off, and you're just like, Jesus. Like, sometimes severance doesn't cover all these 9 months. So like, how do you survive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is really scary. Luckily, not happened to me. And again, luckily in the Netherlands, we have the unemployment benefit. But yeah, if you're an expat and you've moved here, the amount of time you have unemployment benefit depends how long you've been employed here. So, I mean, both times I got laid off, I just went like so hard on the market. I just made it was my job to find a new job, right? And I had a bit of time to go, okay, what do I actually want? But I think it's about, like what worked for me is just networking. That really worked. So I don't think I even applied for my current job that I have now. I just I got laid off, immediately messaged the founder of the company and was like, hey, do you want to?
Straight
Yeah,
away.
straight away. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. You have to be like, well, you have to decide what you want, right? But after you've decided what you want, like straight away, go for it.
Yeah.
That's a personal thing though, because I was just like, yeah, I don't want to be too sad about this. I'm just going to pick myself up and go for it.
Yeah. My next question was literally like, if you and
Yeah.
I were to be, touch wood, laid off tomorrow,
Yeah.
what would your action plan
So,
be?
you know what's funny is I actually tracked the numbers both times I was laid off, and both times I applied for 40 jobs.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, this is the thing. A lot of the time you don't get a response from the company. Sometimes you get a rejection. Then maybe like a few of them you'll get interviews. One or two will go to second interview and one will go to the offer. So for me, like I just look at it as a numbers game. So just think about it. I mean, like you're a recruiter. I used to be a recruiter, but I go, okay, cool. Like I need a job. Like what's the top of the funnel look like? How many jobs do I need to apply for
Yeah.
to get one job? And I found that was 40.
40 to 1.
Yeah. Yeah. But also as well, so the first time I got laid off, I remember I was living in the Netherlands, and then I applied for a job that I got, and in the job it said you have to speak Dutch. I was like, I'm just gonna go for it anyway, and I ended up getting that job even not speaking Dutch, right? So literally,
What?
yeah. So it's like I think as well, it's important to. I mean, you probably saw the stat about typically like women will, if they don't fit all the job requirements, they won't apply, whereas guys will. Have you seen that?
Yeah, they've got the confidence. They're
Yeah.
just going to go for it.
Yeah, you like read the job. Oh, I don't have that. Okay, cool. It's not for me. So yeah, doesn't matter if you don't fit the job description. Just go for it.
Yeah, 70%, I think, is the minimum kind of
Yeah.
requirement. Even as a recruiter, that's what
Yeah.
I will look for, because then we can upskill you or train you
Yeah.
internally on the rest.
Yeah,
And it also widens our talent pool
exactly.
doing it that way. I can't believe you got hired for a job you didn't speak the language of.
Yeah,
That's
so the first time I
wild.
got laid off, I got hired for a job I didn't speak the language, and then the second time I got laid off, I didn't even apply for the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would your action plan be? We can maybe like brainstorm. So like you touched on networking.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely my first thing I would do, even if it was about to happen. I would just start reaching out to like hiring managers I know or people I've met at networking events, and just being like, oh, I'm going to keep an eye out. Like just not even like, let me know,
But
just be like, do you have something?
But
Like,
this is also what I mean about not necessarily expecting to get laid off in your job, but at some point in your life, you'll get laid off, which is why the networking is really important, right? So when I got laid off, I reached out to someone I'd met from networking, right? So it's just like making sure, it's about your personal brand, like making sure, again, you know, you're promoting yourself and networking kind of before it even happens. Not that you're expecting it to happen, but just making sure you're keeping that touch with the market, right? You go into the networking events.
Don't forget people you've met. Like, don't just start ghosting them or.
Yeah. This is also why we always say, a company, kindness is magic. This is why just be nice to people, because you're never going to know when. And the other thing as well, like people like helping people, you know? So, I mean, I found it was good for me to try to get over it fast, because you are, like you said, when you get laid off, you're grieving, right? And
it's like a breakup. You want to either get over it,
is a
or
breakup.
under
It
it.
is a breakup.
Yeah,
it actually is.
Yeah.
And this is why I think I always say this when people get laid off, and then, you know, again, in the Netherlands, we have to sign a mutual agreement, right? You can challenge that if you want. And then people are like, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to challenge it. And I'm like, they're literally breaking up with you, right? So it's like me saying, yeah, I want to break up, and you saying, no, you can't.
Yeah, like a prenup. Yeah, kind
you're
of
like
thing.
saying, no, I don't want to break up. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So this is why for me, I've in my examples, I've been like, you know what, I'm just going to sign the papers, just move on with my life, not spend my energy being sad about it and being like, oh, what if they did this, what if I did that? That's such a waste of energy.
Because their mind is kind of done.
Yeah, they're done.
Yeah.
They've gone through a whole process, and they've gone from all the people, and they've chosen you, right? So it's like,
Which
they're
kind
done.
of sucks.
Yeah,
It sounds horrible.
It hurts. Yeah, it hurts, right? It hurts your feelings because you've been attached to this company. But yeah, so try and get over it as fast as possible, and not spend energy thinking about what could have been or what should have been. Because
and don't be scared of the market either.
Yeah.
I think that's also a good thing to say, because like you, I don't think I've applied for, how many jobs have I applied for here? My first one 6 years ago. That's it. the first one to get into the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And every other one has been via like referral, or most recently, my boss actually approached me because I've known him since 2019. So I've just always been on his radar, and it just happened by chance
Yeah.
that I was available, which was, I really lucked out because it's like such a good company, and I'm so
And
grateful.
like one thing I say is, the term I use is keep the pressure on the market. And what I mean by that is, so first of all, like reach out to people you know and be public about it. Like make the LinkedIn post. I just
Yeah,
got laid off.
just go for
just
it.
go for
Green
it.
banner it.
Yeah. And then you reach out to people you know. Hey, do you want to like meet for coffee? Apply for jobs. And what I noticed is you can cover the market quite fast. And what I mean by that is, the first time you look for jobs, there's all these jobs you're applying for. But at one point, you've applied for the jobs that you like, and then it's more tracking what's coming up every day. So I made the rule for myself to make sure I apply for one job a day. Like,
Yeah.
and at the start, that's really easy. At the start, you're doing like 5, sometimes 10 applications, right? You're going getting this cover letter out. But at some point, you kind of applied for the jobs you can. So it's more like looking at what comes up every day. But the reason I gave myself that target was because it made me apply for jobs I might not have applied for, right? Like, I mean, it's quite easy for me because I knew I wanted to stay in HR and be a business partner. So I was applying for HR business partner roles, but then it made me widen the net a little bit, right? Because I'd applied for all the jobs in Amsterdam. Like, okay, well, now I need to start looking at Utrecht or Leiden and kind of go out of the city. So that's what I mean about keeping the pressure on the market, like making sure you're speaking to recruiters and like you're getting touted around, as it were. Making sure your CV is out there.
Yeah, and you mentioned personal brands, so that means just the LinkedIn profile, it's sharp. You've got a picture, like headline, you kind of write what you do, like expectations and stuff, what you've achieved, just an advert, essentially. Yeah, when you're reaching out to people. Yeah. Because people get quite scared with like the word personal brand and like, what is that? Yeah. So it's just very basic. It's just LinkedIn, essentially. With applications, though, did you personalize it, or were you just, like you said, smashing it out and just sending cover letters and stuff and just hoping for the best?
So I have an interesting view on cover letters. Do you read them?
Only if I like the look of a CV that comes in, and I'm just wondering, like, why? You know, like I want an additional story alongside the CV. I know one career coach I've interviewed here that she reads all of them. Yeah, I don't read all of them.
Is that Lara?
No, it was Silvana.
Okay.
Yeah.
So but of course, making sure that the cover letter is personalized. Like a lot of people are using ChatGPT now. And I've literally seen people getting rejected because you just like, okay, I'm just reading a AI cover letter. So
you haven't even made the effort.
Don't get me wrong, like I'm a fan of using the tools available to you, but like, and fair enough, you can use ChatGPT to make the structure, but making sure that you're personalizing it, because it's really obvious when there's the like machine language. No, for sure. But like, making sure to tailor the applications, and then even like I even just message the hiring manager.
I was gonna ask. So like, if I would apply, I would send a DM straight away, because that works for me. Like as the receiver of applications, if you DM me like, oh, I applied, I make sure you.
But like,
look out for
it reminds me of when I was when I started out as a recruiter, and then I was scared to pick up the phone and do the business development calls. And then my manager, she said, well, they're already not your client. So what, are they going to be your client less? You know, like you already don't work there. So like you can't work there less. You're already not working there. So it's like, what is the harm in messaging people?
Yeah. And it has to be the right message,
and people,
though.
I know for sure. Like it has to, but there has to be a reason, right? Like, hey, I saw this vacancy. I saw you're the hiring manager. I would love to talk to you about it. But you know, some people, this is the thing, some people think companies are people, and they're like, okay, they're like, well, I've already messaged one person at that company. It's like, okay, number one, they probably haven't read your message. If they have read your message, they're not going to tell someone else about it. So you don't be thinking there's like people going, oh, well, I also received a message from this person.
Oh,
like,
Lisa messaged me.
No, that doesn't happen. I get all these messages. I don't tell all my coworkers all these people message me, you know?
Yeah. Rule of thumb is message 10 people in a company.
Yeah.
To get through to one at least, or let them refer you.
Yeah. And I guess it's easy for us to say, right? Because, you know, we're recruiters, and then we think this way.
But we've also been on the other side as well.
Exactly. But not everyone has. So yeah, it is kind of a sales process. I look at it as a sales process, but also as well, when I was looking, I also made sure to not get attached. luckily at the time I was doing a yoga teacher training, and that was all about
Oh,
like,
cool.
but that was all about non-attachment to, it's like, don't get attached to the result. Like your role is to do the action and do the action really well,
Mm.
but don't think about the result. If the result will come, does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
It's like, just focus on your task and do your task to the best of your ability, and then you'll get the result. It might not be the one you're expecting, but and also be open to surprises as well. You know what? I'm going to tell the story of my current job because it's interesting in how I got it.
Are you sure?
Yeah. So, okay. So, as it happens in my company, I'm the only male employed by the company. Yeah, there's only 15 of us. So, we do want to get more guys on the team.
Girl power.
Yeah, girl power. I mean, it's HR, right? Which is typically a female-dominated environment. So, we do want more guys on the team. But anyway, how I got the role was is that 7 people. They organized a networking event, which I went to. This is before I wasn't expecting to get laid off at this point, but just met the team. I was nice to them. Anyway, then I got laid off. So I messaged Ingeborg, the founder of my company. And I found this out afterwards. This is a coincidence. But what happened was the team was sat around saying, wouldn't it be cool to have a guy on the team, right? And then they were like, yeah, we met this guy at this networking event. Oh, what was his name? And they couldn't remember my name. And apparently in that moment, that's when I messaged Ingeborg, was saying, hey, I just got laid off. Do you want to meet for coffee?
Yeah.
So you never know these things that will happen. And then they were
It was like fate, almost.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, there he is.
Yeah. Then she was like, was it Paul? They're like, yeah, that was him. So yeah, you're never going to know what's going to happen. So yeah, this is why I don't see any harm in reaching out to people, because the worst they're going to say is no.
Yeah, I agree. So if we were let off tomorrow, again, touch wood, networking, LinkedIn profile, snatched, up to date, attend events virtually, physically, be memorable. Don't be like Paul where they forget your name.
Yeah.
And then by chance they
Who's
mention
that
you. Make sure you're memorable. And I think go in with the mindset of like, I want to meet at least, like, research before who's attending, meet at least 2 or 3 people and really have conversations with them.
I think with this one, and again, it's just like you're talking about, updating the LinkedIn profile, blah, blah, blah. But like, just keep making sure there's always an ongoing thing. So it's not just like, oh, I've been laid off, now I need to update my LinkedIn profile. Now I need to like go to a networking event. It's like, do that while you're working.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So then it's like,
you need to maintain it.
Right.
Yeah. I still do it.
Yeah.
Like, even though I'm really fresh at my company, nothing's going to happen, hopefully.
Yeah.
I'm still going. You have to be relevant.
By the way, one point I did want to make, because we were talking about restructures, but like, if you look at the data, there's been a lot less restructures this year. And actually,
really?
Yeah. And I think if there's an article I was reading yesterday from a salary benchmarking tool, which is Ravio, and the data they have is, there's more people being hired. Recruiters are cool again, right? Like recruiters are finding it easier to find jobs. So from what I've seen in the market, like there has been a way more positive trend this year.
But in the news, it just sounds really dramatic. Like 10,000 people, 1,500 people in Europe. Like, maybe it's just how the news is making it sound like.
Yeah, I think like the news is like sensationalizes a lot, but like, yeah, and it might be some bigger companies that are laying off a lot of people, but there is still like a lot of jobs out there in the market.
Yeah.
Lots of different scale-up companies. There's starting to be more investment in companies now, so they're wanting to grow. So like, definitely, last year seemed to be, to me, a lot of layoffs, but like this year is a bit more positive, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Like, as a news reader, like in the recruitment world, I thought it was more. It looks like more.
Yeah.
I'm hearing it every week at different
But
companies.
it's more like,
doing
it seems
something.
like bigger companies, right?
Yeah, the bigger ones. I wonder, from your experience, just like as a final thought to this whole topic, because I just noticed, and I think everyone else does, the like overhiring because of the interest or demand in the product or service, and then layoffs, and it just seems like it's a never-ending loop.
Yep.
How can hiring teams or companies just stop?
So I think
doing that?
I think this is where like it comes into being the recruitment business partner, and like, rather than just, and it's the same with teams, like, for example, if a manager comes to me saying I want to hire, then I'm like, why? And actually I tried to talk them out of it. And a lot of the times unfortunately, it's a vanity exercise because they're like, well, if my team gets bigger, I'm going to be more important, right? So managers want to hire people because it makes them feel more important. So it's really about challenging that. I've seen a lot, when I've been working in SaaS companies, they're like, okay, if we need more clients, we need to have a bigger sales team, right? And so then they're
Yeah.
like, okay, well, and then they look at the numbers and they're like, okay, well, each account exec is doing, I don't know, depending on the company size, they're doing X amount of deals a year. To hit the growth target, we need to do this many deals, which means we need to hire that many people.
That
Okay.
happens in recruitment as well, in
Yeah.
sales. Yeah.
Yeah, but actually, I always say if they want to, let's use sales as an example because it's an easy one to understand. If the sales director's like, okay, cool, I need more people, my first question is like, well, are all of your people at capacity? Right? Are they hitting their targets? Oh no, they're not. This person's underperforming. Like, okay, well then I'm like, that means you still have extra bandwidth in your team. So it's like, get your team to be productive first, then we can talk about adding people in.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
it's like having a bit of a different mindset, not being like people equals results. Because the other thing as well is there's a law of diminishing returns. So as you get, for example, in a sales team bigger, not everyone's going to be billing or doing deals at the same level as the highest performer. And in a bigger team, you're going to have a higher percentage of lower performers. So then that's more work to manage them. Also, there's more touch points, there's more communication points. So it's like you don't necessarily always want a bigger team. So you have to think about these things. So yeah, I guess, but for me, the key point is making sure you're challenging managers to really why they need to hire.
Yeah.
Because what I've seen is, it's overhiring and then later on we have to correct it. So I would always exercise caution before we make a hire into the company.
Yeah,
so,
like forecasting for the business, and you want to forecast for recruiting and the headcount.
But yes, this is why it's like make sure your team is performing and productive first before we add on additional people.
Yeah, this is what worries me about AI specific positions because they're so niche. And why not just upskill people in your team and train them for 1 hour, 2 hours or something on the topic or the skill, right?
Yeah.
It's just easier.
Yeah, and there's like also it's about being creative and thinking about things. Like I don't know whether you've ever heard of the concept of holacracy.
The what?
Holacracy.
No, I don't.
It's a different way to manage your company. And the leadership sign the constitution of the company, and then the teams are way more self-organized. But rather than saying we need to have this specialist position, it's like, well, why can't that just be part of someone else's role? You know, we don't always need to have like all these specialists all the time. I guess the point is, it's like people can have multiple roles. You don't just have to have one role. And I think people are in this headspace of like, okay, they're specialized in this, they're specialized in this, but actually usually people can do 2 or 3 different
positions.
roles. Yeah,
at once. Yeah.
So yeah, just thinking more creatively is what I would say. We don't always need to hire people all the time, right? You're like, oh, I have this demand, let's hire someone. Well, okay, well, no, how can, like, actually, if I look at your team, like, I can see them playing table tennis and like kicking a ball around the office. Like, are they really that busy?
The workload isn't dispersed properly.
Yeah, and I think you've probably heard of Pareto's law, right? Where like 80% of the work is being done by 20% of the people. So yeah, there's usually people with spare capacity, and then okay, they can take on additional.
But maybe they don't want to.
Maybe they don't want to. Could also happen, right? And that's also fine. And then they can just stay in the level they're at.
Yeah, the ones that are like behind the scenes, low radar, like they don't even volunteer. They're just kind of in the background, like, I'm so busy.
Yeah.
And just block out their calendars. You made me just think of one more thing. So this is what we'll actually wrap up the episode with. It's another trending topic on TikTok where basically this person, I don't know who it is, but this person said that companies, for example, Nike are laying off 1,500 people, but then they still post jobs. Why does that happen? People are very confused. And this person basically said, oh, there's like a whole myth. Is it a myth?
Yeah, myth.
Around it. Yeah. That basically they just want to upkeep appearance, that they're growing, they're still hiring, even though they're just laying off people in the background. So they're fake jobs.
Okay.
What do you think about that? Because I have.
Is that true though? Are they fake jobs or?
Well, I've been on the other side of it where a company was like nearly declaring bankruptcy.
Yeah.
But we actually genuinely needed these specific people, like in finance, for example, and stuff like that. So they weren't fake. It's
Yeah.
just we needed people to facilitate it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so sometimes when you're going through a strategic people planning process, right, you go, okay, like this is our company strategy, these are our objectives. And then you're like, what roles do I need to hit that? So you have what we call the dream chart. This is the roles we have. Okay, so this is how we want the org to look. Then you look at the org now, and you're like, okay, cool. We have these people in these roles. These are the new roles. Could be like we're having a different focus for the company or a change in strategy or whatever. Then you look at the people and you say, okay, cool. Like some of them is one for one. You're like, yeah, okay, cool. That person we need. This person, that role we need. Usually you do it in roles rather than people.
Mm.
So you go, okay, cool. Like this is where we were trying to get. This is where the org is now. So then you're like, okay, well, there's some roles in the new org that you might not be able to fill. And you look at the people and you say, okay, cool, who can I upskill to fit this role? But sometimes there's no one you can skill. Sometimes you're like, actually, I don't have this skill in the organization. And that's when we do the layoff. We let go of this group of people, but then there's still roles in the new org that we need to fill.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, for me it makes sense. I hope it makes sense for the
So
listeners.
yeah, like that's and that's the decision you need to make. Like who has the attitude and like capability. And this is why one of the biggest skills at the minute in have you heard of 21st century skills?
Not worded like that, but I think I know what you mean.
But like you know, really desirable skills are people who can like learn fast and
yes,
are adaptable.
adaptability.
Adaptability. Yeah, and they're the people that can maybe change into a different role.
Yeah.
But that's why that happens. That's why you see companies have layoffs and then they're still hiring. You're like, that doesn't make any sense.
Can you tell us the skills just in case people are like, oh,
I can't remember off the top of my head, but if you Google 21st century skills, but it's stuff like
open-mindedness as well.
Yeah, but also like technical literacy, right? Because we're always having to go on these different platforms and tools, right?
Yeah.
So you have to learn how to use tech fast.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. These are 21st century skills. But yeah, that's why because you from the outside in, you're like, they just laid off these people. Why are they hiring? It doesn't make sense. But that's because for the roles in the new org design, the people they don't have their skills already in the organization. And AI is a good one. Maybe it's a new skill that we didn't think we needed before.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I might do a stitch with the original TikTok and then you as the reply. So it just addresses the myth once and for all.
Yeah.
Sick. But Paul, if I want to find you at a networking event, that's kind of creepy. If I want to see you on networking events you're going to attend, if I want to see stuff you're publishing, for example, or talking about in the HR space, how can I find you? Again, not creepy.
So luckily at 7 People, we have a lot of our own meetups and events. So you can check out the 7 People website. I think it's 7people.team, and that has some of our events. I also have my own podcast, which is called Have You Got 5 Minutes? And that's aimed at like managers and also employees to kind of get an insight in how people and culture teams deal with different situations. We just recorded a podcast about feedback. We just recorded one about diversity and inclusion. Our first ever episode was about company parties.
Oh, I need to check that one out. Is it juicy?
A little bit.
Okay. Yeah, as a HR person, you're like the party pooper, aren't you?
Yeah.
Just watching people like.
But this is also what we talk about on the podcast, right? It's because the people and culture team are the owners of the culture, right? So they're the ones typically involved a lot in like organizing the events and like the fun stuff. And then you're saying, then they're also the police. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. The fun police. And for me, that's like a bit weird. That's conflicting. It's like, we want me to organize the party, but also stop the fun. Like, which is it? So yeah, I talk about that in the podcast actually, about how, if you see behavior you don't you need to challenge. If you see behavior you think is unacceptable, you are the one that needs to challenge it. Don't come and tell the HR. So many times in my career, people come and say, "Hey, Paul, I don't like this, I don't like that."
Like you're the parent of
I'm like, we'll go and tell them.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I don't actually have a problem with it. You do. You go and tell them. You see.
Yeah.
And I can teach you how to give feedback. I can teach you communication and different way to bring messages.
Different kind of
but
party.
You have to do it.
Do you post much on LinkedIn?
I'm not so good at LinkedIn. I get in trouble a lot with my my manager, the founder of my company, that I don't post enough. I repost a lot.
Yeah, repost. That's okay. So we can also find you on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
As
exactly.
well.
On
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
And then 7 People's very active on LinkedIn's
Like
career
our,
page. Yeah.
our 7 People pages and my co-workers are as well.
Yeah. Fabulous. Paul, this was a very insightful episode, even for me.
You're welcome. Yeah, for me, I'm happy you said it's insightful because for me, I feel like I'm just saying obvious stuff, but it's good that you found it insightful for sure.